Prosecutors wrapped up their case against the man they say was a major trafficker in cocaine here in Jacksonville. Henry Mann is on trial along with several others. Police say he controlled about 30% of the drug distributed in the city. They say his was a $10 million a year operation.
On a Wednesday night in Jacksonville, August 1988, 16-year-old Jacob Jones was driving a borrowed Suzuki Samurai through the 1400 block of West 26th Street when he noticed a red Hyundai following him. Jones pulled into a driveway and the Hyundai stopped. A gunman jumped out, and before the teenager could make sense of what was happening, the man demanded to know one thing: where's Lancer? Then he opened fire. At least 5 shots from a 9mm ripped towards the little Suzuki, with several rounds striking the vehicle. Jones escaped without being hit, but the owner of that truck, 19-year-old Lancer Hill, was nowhere around, and that was the only reason he survived that night. Because 1 week earlier, Hill had sat inside a federal courtroom and told jurors that he had transported cocaine from South Florida to Jacksonville for a young drug boss named Henry Mann. Police said Hill was the apparent target, but never established if Henry Mann ordered the shooting, but the message was still clear. Hill had taken a stand, and somebody came looking for him, looking to do more than just talk. And to understand why a 19-year-old witness had become important enough for a gunman to hunt him through Jacksonville, you have to understand what Henry Mann had built. Because less than 2 years earlier, Henry Mann was riding around as a truck driver, not a kingpin. Then crack cocaine came to Jacksonville, and Henry Mann found his lane. By the mid-'80s, crack wasn't simply another drug arriving in Northeast Florida. It was changing the economics of the street. Dealers who once concentrated inside Jacksonville began spreading outwards into Orange Park, Clay County, St. Johns County, Nassau County, and smaller communities where crack was harder to find, and customers sometimes paid more. And from 1986 to 1987, Duval County reported cocaine possession offenses jumped from 553 to 1,242, an increase of 125%, while cocaine sale offenses increased 49%. In 1988, out of Jacksonville's 197 homicides, 86 were described as drug-related.
As for Jacksonville's exploding murder rate, the sheriff says of the more than 42 unsolved murder cases on the books, half have been drug-related.
And right there in the middle of the chaos was Henry Leon Mann's. How fast Mann's organization rose was something many had never seen. Police alleged that little more than 15 months before his arrest, Mann was unemployed. But by 1988, federal and local investigators were describing him as the leader of an organization doing approximately $10 million a year. The transformation was so dramatic that investigators gave their case a name, built around Mann's old bicycle, Operation 10 Speed. Operating in Jacksonville and nearby Orange Park from around December 1986 to March 1988, Henry and his brother Emmett Lamar Mann led the organization. But Henry was the face people noticed. The money became visible almost as quickly as it arrived. Jewelry, cars, cash, and photographs. With one being so infamous, it became part of Jacksonville folklore. Michael Keeley was described as Henry's right-hand man, or chief lieutenant. Henry's cousin, Richard Nixon, worked as the connection between the organization and numerous street-level dealers, while his father, Jimmy Lee Nixon, operated in Georgia as one of the contractors purchasing cocaine for resale. Gerald Wells from Fort Lauderdale was allegedly one of the organization's suppliers. At the center of that network was Mann's Confectionery, a store located at 1446 West State Street that looked like any other neighborhood business. But according to prosecutors, Richard Nixon ran street-level distribution through the store, with the majority of the organization's crack being distributed to street dealers through the confectionery. But the store wasn't the only place the organization used to hide in plain sight. Cora Lee Mosley was a 68-year-old woman that lived around State and Russian streets in an area heavily affected by the crack era. She collected Social Security and a small pension, but being that it hardly paid the bills, she found another way to supplement that income. She let members of the operation leave packages of dope on her front porch, with Richard Nixon initially offering her about $100 a week, but doubling it to $200 after Mosley wanted more. For several months, packages could be left outside while Mosley watched what was happening from inside her home. It was simple, cheap, low profile, and it showed just how deeply the business had woven itself into ordinary neighborhood life. enticing a woman nearly 70 years old, living on retirement income, into a multi-million-dollar drug organization for a couple $100 a week. With all the money coming in, like any organization, there has to be something to protect it. At about 11 p.m. on August 18, 1987, Jacksonville officers Paul Robbins and Lonnie McDonald responded to shots being fired on the 1400 block of West State Street. When officers arrived, they found a shotgun and a 9mm Uzi underneath a tree. A live pipe bomb was found on the ground near Suzuki Samurai. A .44 caliber revolver, another shotgun, and a second Uzi were recovered from vehicles. A bomb specialist had to come to the scene to disarm the device. 3 men were arrested at the scene: Henry Leon Manns, his brother Emmett Lamar Manns, and their cousin Richard Nixon. All 3 were initially charged in connection with possession of the bomb, but prosecutors still had a problem when Manns eventually went on federal trial. Having guns near alleged drug dealers didn't automatically prove those weapons were part of the drug conspiracy. The government had to connect the violence to the business. That's where Lancer Hill came in. Hill testified that another drug dealer had moved into territory run by Mann's organization, and when the rival dealer drove past, shots were sent his way. His testimony allowed prosecutors to argue that the August confrontation was connected to a street war between rival drug organizations and helped clear the way for the machine guns and pipe bomb to be shown to the jury. Now Operation 10 Speed wasn't just following money, it was listening to phones. Investigators spent months building the case before securing the wiretap, first tapping the telephone at an Orange Park residence used by Michael Keeley and Richard Nixon. Then they received authorization to tap the phone in Mann's confectionery. By the time the case reached trial, prosecutors had 45 recordings of intercepted telephone conversations from September, October, and November to present to jurors, and the wiretaps were backed by physical evidence as well. Authorities had stopped Henry Manns and Michael Keeley at Jacksonville's airport carrying $73,000 in cash while traveling on Fort Lauderdale tickets purchased under fake names. During a separate reckless driving stop, police found another $6,000 in cash and large amounts of gold jewelry inside a rented vehicle. Then came one of the biggest seizures in the case. Intercepted conversations indicated Manns would be driving from Fort Lauderdale towards Jacksonville, carrying cocaine. Agents positioned themselves along Interstate 95, and then they spotted the rented car. They allegedly clocked Manns traveling 81 miles per hour, and after police stopped him, they found 2 kilograms of powdered cocaine inside the trunk. By March 1988, law enforcement decided it had enough. On March 15, 1988, the raids began, hitting several locations around Jacksonville. Manns and numerous associates were taken into custody, with the headlines reading, $10 million crack ring cracked. 20 cars were reportedly seized along with jewelry and automatic weapons. In January 1991, authorities arrested Carl Johnson in Broward County, alleging he had supplied powder and crack cocaine to the Jacksonville operation. By then, 18 people had reportedly been sentenced for roles connected to the organization. Henry Manns went to trial in the summer of 1988, with the government painting him as the man giving directions. The defense argued that prosecutors were relying on criminals trying to save themselves, confusing phone conversations and evidence that had been exaggerated to transform Manns into something larger than he really was. But by closing arguments, the government had reduced his case into one central idea: Henry Manns was the top leader, and the jury agreed. On November 17, 1988, 25-year-old Henry Manns was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. But his story wasn't finished yet. On December 7, 1990, the appellate court largely upheld the convictions in the government's investigation, but it found problems with portions of the sentencing calculations and sent the cases back for resentencing. In July 1991, Judge Susan Black resentenced Manns to approximately 19 and a half years in federal prison. Now, life had become a number. Years passed, and the gold chains disappeared. The confectionery disappeared from the case headlines, and Operation 10 Speed became Jacksonville history. And eventually, Manns came home in 2007 after a deal was made with prosecutors. But 3 years later, Henry Manns walked into another drug investigation, and this time, the government was waiting for him. On November 17, 2010, Manns met a female undercover officer and an undercover DEA agent at a McDonald's in Lake City, Florida. The DEA agent was posing as a Mexican cocaine supplier capable of providing kilogram quantities. Mann said he wanted to begin with a key, negotiating a price at $26,000. Mann indicated that if the first transaction worked, he wanted to increase the quantities later. But when it came time to close the deal, Mann couldn't put together the entire $26,000, so the plan changed to half a key. On December 6, 2010, Mann returned to Lake City carrying $13,100, $10,600 inside an envelope, and another $2,500 in his pocket. Mann threw the envelope onto the center console of the undercover vehicle, and another undercover vehicle arrived with 2 keys of cocaine in the trunk. The agents told Mann that since he had bought half the money, 1 kilogram could be split and Mann could receive half. After Mann agreed, the agent gave the signal, and just like that, Henry Mann was back in handcuffs. On January 11, 2012, the federal court sentenced Mann to 15 years. Mann said he had been trying to help a cousin, but either way, the judge still sent him back.